Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. This webinar is presented to you by AC3 and Datadog. We'll be taking you on a cloud migration journey and showing you how you could use Datadog as part of that journey and to think about how to move beyond traditional monitoring and into full stack observability. All right, so we'll start off with a little bit about AC3. AC3 is a privately owned Australian ICT managed services provider. It was founded in 1999. Our purpose is to make technology real, and with over 14,000 virtual machines under management, we do this for more than half of the New South Wales state government agencies and over 700 commercial customers. With over 270 full-time employees and over 80 contractors, AC3 has the skills and scale to help our customers realize their business objectives. Add to that our 1,200 plus contingent workforce who are certified and pre-vetted, and you can trust that AC3 are nimble enough to meet the requirements of any project. AC3 is a business built on its people. We believe magic happens when we combine our people with the best technologies. We pride ourselves on the service we deliver every step of the way. Our people live by our purpose to make technology real, and our vision to have the opportunity to help every organization in ANZ be a hero for their customers. Today, you are joined by Greg Coburn, that's me. I'm the Principal Practice Lead at AC3, and Waldo Grinenwald, Tech Evangelist at Datadog. Waldo, over to you.
Thanks, Greg. So, hi, I'm a tech evangelist for Datadog. I used to be a productive member of society before I took this job. But now I do come from the systems and ops engineering world. And now my job mostly is to talk with people and try to encourage them to have better monitoring and observability lives. And in case you don't know, Datadog is an observability platform that provides full visibility across your organization. We span end-to-end from your infrastructure and network to your applications and your services, all the way to your end users. What this does is it enables everyone, whether it's development or operations, security, to really anybody in the business, to have a shared understanding of your systems and the ability to identify and resolve problems when they arise. If you want to find out more about how we can help you, or if you want to try, we have a 14-day free trial that gives you access to everything. Check out datadoghq.com. We have a little terminology to cover, just to make sure that we're talking about the same things. Now, this first one, digital transformation, in reality, it can mean anything. Oftentimes, it's a shorthand for whatever your project, your next big project is, whether it's migrating data centers to a cloud, or using more platform as a service, or maybe you have some old software that is paying the bills but is difficult to work on, and chances are it's something resembling a monolith, and you want to break it down into some more manageable services, whether they're just smaller ones or going all the way to a microservice type architecture. This can be a great many of things, so it's very much an umbrella term. Cloud migration, this again can mean a great many things, but it is most often unburdening yourself of, here's your buzzword of the night, undifferentiated heavy lifting. This is making the conscious decision that you don't want to be in the business of running a data center anymore, or at least offloading some of that responsibility to other people who are dedicated to that. And most often this means taking your existing services and at the very least doing a lift and shift, as they say, to a cloud provider. There are many ways to go about this, but this is largely what we're talking about when we say cloud migration. Now, hybrid cloud is, if nothing else, a phase that you have to go through when you're doing a cloud migration, But in reality, this could be a long-term way of life for you as well. What this generally means is that you're running some things in an IaaS. You may have some services, you're probably running some services in a PaaS, but you may also be have decided whether you have to or want to, out of preference or let's say cost, had decided you're better off running some things inside your own data center, but want to move other things to the cloud. Regardless, even if you're doing shutting down all of your data centers, you're going to be running in a hybrid cloud environment in some way. And this shouldn't be thought of as a term of cloud shaming. It's just a reality. There's no way that you can do everything all at once and flip the giant switch and have everything suddenly running out of the cloud perfectly. You're being left behind. You need observability. And I say that two things can be true at once, but also that these two things are not the same. Observability, if we look at its word, the type of word it is, it's an adjective. It's a property of your systems, of your services, of how well can you answer an arbitrary question about how it's performing and how it's behaving. Monitoring is the active watching of a set of metrics or behaviors. And the two things go hand in hand. Monitoring is a verb, observability is an adjective. So if somebody is really trying to sell you hard on that, well, that's a monitoring product, but this one's an observability product, they may be trying to sell you something. And I may be an evangelist for something like that, but really there's not a hard line drawn between them because they are related to the same thing. Take that with a grain of salt. And the final thing we want to touch on in the terminology section are the concept of SLAs, SLOs, and SLIs. Now, this is a large topic all by itself. I've given whole talks on this. If you have an SLA, it's probably within a business provider context between you and a customer, or you and a service provider that has financial implications should certain things be broken. An SLO is service level objective. This is just a way of measuring a decision point, whether you're going to focus engineering effort on creating new features or whether you should be prioritizing stability instead. An SLI is an indicator. It's a specific metric over a time period that you are going to highlight and base your SLOs off. Let's talk about some transformation challenges. And the first one that we should cover is goals. When you stand up to plan your meeting, the big meeting to identify your digital transformation, the first thing you need to make clear broadly is what the goals are and define them very explicitly. Make sure your teams know what you're trying to achieve. And, this could be as simple as describing whether you're playing football or hockey. Your teams need to know what game they're playing. Now, are you going for cost savings or are you going for higher velocity? Do you want more dynamic scaling? Now, by not being explicit and driving home well what goals you're going for, you will lead to some suboptimal outcomes because different people will be optimizing for different things. And the very worst would be trying to do things the way they were doing them in the private data center, but in the cloud. It can work, but it won't ever work as well as it should. Greg, do you have any thoughts on that?
100% agree there, Waldo. From the outset, I think you've got to have goals. Look, not everybody can see into the future and know the 5-year horizon, but definitely setting something for a 12 to 24 month kind of time span is definitely worthwhile. It gives everyone something that they understand to work towards, and you want to have an acknowledgement of what those goals are, from not just from a technology perspective, but how they work back into what is the business goals, right? What is their go-to-market strategy of the business, and what are the new areas that they'd like to get into in product space, or new markets that they might like to.
So the next challenge is measuring success. And now if you tell people how they're going to be measured, they're going to try to find ways to optimize for that. But it is important for people to know how you're going to measure what success is. And it doesn't need to be in a, win or lose category. Just, are we doing the right things, and how should we change course if things aren't going well? As you can see here, this was 5 minutes of me gathering things from near my office and kitchen, and we have a dozen different ways of measuring different things. So we can be even more creative in a business context. Have you ever seen this go horribly, horribly wrong?
Anything can go horribly, horribly wrong. Take those the goals and write them down. Now, once you've got the goals written down, how are you going to measure them? Now, write that down, right? And that goes a little bit back to our SLAs and SLOs, and we'll cover that a little bit more in detail soon. But make sure that you understand the metrics that you're going to use to measure that success, your goals, right? And go back to them repeatedly. How are you tracking? Have dashboards. Have it's the classic one. The kids want to save up for something, so draw it on the wall, and as they save up, you keep measuring that, right? And you can see how close you are to success. Same thing applies. Takes those same principles and apply them to your IT team and your business as a whole, and work it through with your IT platforms. 100%.
Let's see. The next challenge is, in any digital transformation, is going to be that of you're living in split environments. And this relates to the hybrid cloud thing that I mentioned earlier. Your reality will include having split environments, and this is going to bring all kinds of complications. Having good monitoring and observability, having good dashboards that cover both the existing and the new environments is going to be very helpful. But there are going to be other things that aren't going to be as easy to solve. You're going to have experience gaps. You're going to have drastically increased complexity, and all kinds of more things, all kinds of more problems that will crop up as things go along.
I think the key here is as you start your journey, make sure you baseline what you've got before you start splitting that environment, right? Let's get the Datadog agent deployed onto the existing environment. Let's get it running, and let's get a baseline of where you go. So as you start to do that migration, and you start to have the some of parts of the application or some parts of your systems running in cloud versus on-premise, that you've actually understanding as to, is it at least performing as good as it did before or better? And as you go along, you can bring in that whole view of the world as you're going along, and looking back at your success criteria and making sure that is being met as you go along with just your IT systems alone, and the performance of them across both on-premises and in the cloud. 100%. I think it's a key thing that people kind of put aside when they're looking at doing their migrations, right? They've got a platform that has been running in the data center, and it's probably got some gaps and all the rest of it, and got some good points to it as well. But they try to either they don't understand what is required to move it to the cloud as part of that migration. So thinking about all of those pieces as you go, and getting an understanding across the entire board, really important.
100% agree. So the next thing that we want to touch on is mistakes. They are going to happen.
And I wonder
I
if
hear that this
anyone.
is a familiar scene.
Uh, yes, there's a famous bridge, right? If anyone on the webinar is from Melbourne, I'm sure, hopefully you'll recognise this famous location that gets a truck stuck in it once in a while. Yeah, yes, yeah, but yeah, look, I love the very the phrase there. Failure is inevitable. Embrace it, understand it, learn from it, right? Like it, you
you can
can't.
spend a oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
go.
Oh, okay. You can spend a lot of time trying to prevent mistakes, um, and even like limiting access to people, to sometimes to the point of making things difficult. But to be honest, most failures are honest mistakes made by people authorized to make those, well, changes would be the better thing, but they are authorized to make those mistakes. Focusing more on the as learning opportunities, by running blameless postmortems and then prioritizing the remediations that come out of them can get you so much further, and you'll get much more out of your employees when they're not concerned about the safety of their job when a mistake, if people are afraid that they're going to get fired for making an honest mistake, they're going to own up to it. That's going to take less time to figure out what happened, and you can set up guardrails around that later. That can be part of the remediation, but having an accidental mistake happen should in general not be a firing offense. And there will be plenty of mistakes in any kind of digital transformation, especially when it's something that requires a change in thinking.
Yeah, I'm sure there was someone famous in the monitoring world who once said something along the lines of, if every metric or every dashboard is the result of an incident or a failure, ultimately, right?
Yeah.
So every time you do those retrospectives on the incident, on the failure, and what comes out of it, a new thing to monitor, a new metric to gather, a new dashboard to look at, a new monitor to alert on, right? So
Yeah.
It's 100%, and I think that might lead us into the next topic quite well.
Yes, indeed. So next we want to talk about going beyond monitoring. You probably have some monitoring in place, but there's a lot you can do to go beyond that. So going beyond monitoring, the first thing to think about is that the investments that you make in your monitoring and observability features is a way to protect your assets, protecting your interests, whether it's your company's IP, whether it's your customer data, or your reputation. These are your assets among many others that you need to preserve to have a successful business or run a successful agency. Now, basic hygiene of locking your doors and keeping up with security updates will prevent a lot of crime in the first place. Taking additional steps will get you more features for protection and more options for remediation. Now, in talking about monitoring, the question of what should we monitor is, there are many different ways to think about it. You should monitor your CPU utilization, but you probably shouldn't be alerting on it. Things that you should pay particular interest to. There's a framework that I like to use. There are a couple others. Is what's called the four golden signals. The acronym that comes out is LETS, for latency, errors, traffic, and saturation. Latency, in short, it very simply is how long it takes to respond to your user's request, or for the things that you depend on to respond to you. If you're calling out to another service as part of what you provide, how long does that take? Errors is self-evident. How many are you or your dependencies generating, and consider it both in terms of the types and the rate that they're occurring. Traffic is the rate of traffic to your applications and to your dependencies. And saturation is the other side of that, is do you have the capacity to meet all of those requests? Have you run out of capacity, of system resources? Have you been throttled by an upstream service for making too many requests? These are things you need to be aware of. Greg, do you have anything to add to that?
Look, you've covered it really well, and I was just trying to remember back to the other ones that are 3-letter acronyms. I think one is RED, and the other one has escaped me, but that Brendan Gregg, for anyone who has been around in the SunOS and Solaris days and things like that, he's definitely had some significant input into what is now the 4 golden signals there. And look, I think that's really important aspects to understand and realize. Marrying those up with your SLOs and SLIs is key. So one thing that I like to use the example around errors, common one with web applications is 500 errors. Now, you're never going to have 0, right? Failure is inevitable. But what is an acceptable level? Is it 2%? Is it 3%? And we go back to our goals and measuring success. Write that down and come back and look at it on a regular basis, right?
Yes.
Make sure that is that something you need to improve? We're just meeting it? Is it a focus area? All those sorts of things. But that, I guess, from there, we need to, once we've actually got metrics and we're looking at everything, we need to alert.
Yes. So when you bring up alerting, most people think about paging, and that's not wrong, but paging is really only one method of alerts. One of Datadog's founders wrote a really good article or essay on alerting, and it's worth looking up. But you should, a point he makes is that you should alert liberally. Make it easy to see when things are not working as desired, but you should be very deliberate of when and who, when you feel like something has to interrupt someone. Make sure that the people who are receiving alerts, make sure that those alerts are actionable and they're going to people who actually can take action on them. Saying that CPU utilization probably doesn't matter to much of anybody as a warning indicator. But having a lower number of logins than expected for your time period, or high rate of errors to say a login service, these are things that should throw up a warning banner and get somebody looking on it rather quickly. Greg, do you have any thoughts there?
Oh no, look, it's a key piece of the puzzle, of course, and just picking the right medium to use for the right type of alert, right? If it, exactly as you were saying, if it needs an alert to go off, then make it an SMS or integrate with some of the many services out there that have apps on your phone that can go loud or very loud and then do escalations as well for P1s. And if it's not important, then create a ticket in whatever sort of system you have on the back end, so that someone can get to it when it's appropriate to get to it, if it's not an urgent requirement. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And each team should feel like, if you're using a group chat app, whether it's Slack or Teams or IRC, create a channel that's just bad news for each product. and every minor alert that triggers can go in there. And when somebody has a little time, or they want a little let's say palate cleanser for work, that they finished a big project and it's too early to quit for the day, but too late to really start digging into something new, maybe you jump in there and pick something off that's creating a little bit of noise, but it's not a big deal.
Yep, definitely.
So the next topic beyond monitoring is measuring success. And this goes back to where I mentioned SLAs and SLOs. Now, a difference between SLAs and SLOs is that SLAs are usually between entities where money changes hands, and it's a breaching your SLA means that often a penalty it will be, you'll get some kind of refund or have to pay back. SLOs are generally between teams, and you can have many of them. In general, an SLO is a complex metric. It's a percentile that is agreed on ahead of time over a period of time. So whether it's a day or a week or a month, and this is often described in terms of the number of nines. So 99.99% is 4 nines. And while it's not bad to be ambitious, people often start much higher much higher SLOs than they actually need, more than their customers require. And a way to think about this is in terms of dollars. However many nines it takes, or however many dollars it takes for you to have the resiliency and availability to get 2 nines, so 99% availability, it takes another order of magnitude in dollars to get you another 9. So it'll take 10 times as much to go from 2 nines to 3 nines.
Yep.
And at some point that not every service requires all of the 9s. And there are different ways that can be mitigated, say with caching systems, or having, or having expectations of eventual consistency in say data layers, that can mitigate some of these problems where you don't necessarily need to have absolutely correct and completely fresh data, where there is okay to have some leeway, to have some slop. It's okay. And these are things that can change as well. The important thing in here is that you're upfront about what you're measuring, how you're measuring, and what promise you're making. And again, this goes back to the prioritizing, whether we do new feature development or we spend some time working on our resiliency and availability. And tying directly in with that is democratizing information. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean put everything on the internet for everybody to see, but within your company, within your zones of trust, for your teams, your partners, whether internal or external, having that information available, it demonstrates trust, but also trustworthiness. But it also lets people know that, for instance, if I'm running a service and I'm promising, say, 3 nines, I can create I'll have dashboards for the services that I'm running, but I can also provide dashboards that are for the people who consume my service. So if I'm running a login service and the shopping cart service needs to interact with me, I provide dashboards. There's no reason for them not to see my working dashboards, but also provide my SLO widgets and maybe some other key metrics that show that my SLO status and related things. And yeah, if I'm having an outage right this minute, but I still have plenty of error budget from the opposite of the SLO, it's not an emergency. We can take the time to finish what we're working on, or use that error budget and see what information comes out of it. But I think in general, I've worked in companies where they had a culture of unintentional secrecy. I've worked at other companies who have had cultures of intentional secrecy, and neither of those are necessarily great situations. But having the information freely available, within our spheres of trust is really empowering, and it's nice to be able to know how another team is doing. And if they're consistently not meeting those, maybe I use that information for myself to find ways to mitigate somebody else's failures or unavailability, let's say. Greg,
cool.
Do you have anything?
No. Look, you've summed it up really well. I think the key thing is, you've got the SLOs. Write them down. Like, often these things I find in companies are kind of in people's heads and all the rest of it, and making them widgets and actually looking at almost in real time as to whether you're meeting them on a rolling 24 hours or whatever basis is writing them down, actually measuring them. It's really important. All right, cool. So I think we'll move on to a few case studies. So we've got our first case study, which we will call Q. So a summary on our first case study: small ops team built from short-term contractors. They were using a reasonably bleeding edge technology at the time. So it was Kubernetes. I think for people who know a little bit about Kubernetes, COPS had just become a thing, and I don't think I actually found it until later into the project. Rancher was around, and we were actually using Rancher, but it was a pretty early version, and there was definitely no managed EKS or AKS or anything like that at the time. It was a brand new build of a consumer-facing financial management application, which was mostly based on iOS and Android. There wasn't a lot that you could do in the web app. It was a microservices-based architecture. So I think in the end, we had about 32 front-facing microservices, plus all the other microservices that hooked into that or did operational type activities. There was many external and internal dependencies. So we had a number of external APIs that we had to call out to, as well as things like Kafka running internally, traditional relational databases, NoSQL databases, that sort of thing. All right. Now, what was the motivation to improve the observability? We had done. It was greenfield. So it's probably something that we want to do and get a baseline. We needed to understand any bottlenecks that we didn't yet know of to avoid issues at go live, right? So we needed to have some sort of way to measure what was going on when we were performing load testing from a whole bunch of different scenarios. We needed a baseline. So kind of similar to your migration journey, we needed to be able to have what does the whole ecosystem look like when we're running our expected number of users through the platform during the middle of the day or late afternoon, I think was our key time. Business metrics were required. So we needed to have the ability to store custom metrics so that we could put them up on dashboards for the various business units or for the service desk to see. And dashboards were required for the business and operational teams, right? Okay, so what did we do to solve this one? Of course, we deployed Datadog, kind of key. We integrated it with all of the AWS accounts. So in that ecosystem at the time, I think we had about 10 or 11 AWS accounts. We integrated it with all the Kubernetes clusters. So using things called daemon sets, which allows you to run a pod on every single node in the cluster so that we could gather Kubernetes metrics. We ingested all of the logs, both from Kubernetes, the operating system, and across the application. We provided a way for the custom metrics to be stored and then presented in dashboards. And we deployed what is commonly referred to as sidecar containers. Now, sidecar containers are another container that can be running in a pod. So inside of Kubernetes, you have this concept of pods, which can be one or more containers. And the sidecar container really doesn't do much. It doesn't really have its own networking. It kind of hooks into the main container in the pod. But we ran the Datadog agent to collect JVM metrics because we were running a Spring Boot. And this became really important when we were trying to understand bottlenecks of our system. So that was a really good, a key piece of the deployment solution. And so this allowed us to kind of baseline the whole system, get to the point where we were able to understand what was going on and to actually resolve a number of issues that we had. We created those custom dashboards, which I alluded to earlier, for the service desk and business to be able to see it, and they were really happy. We deployed things like anomaly detection as well, because we didn't want to end up with any node in a cluster running hot in case of something like an availability zone outage or something like that. So we had a lot of that deployed as well as part of it. There we go, anomaly detection. And we build alerts around that as well. So thinking about that's important, but not critical. All right, the system isn't down, the system is running, but it's an issue that we wouldn't want to be in. And this was before the time. Well, actually, I think we had it in alpha release at the time in Kubernetes. There wasn't such the idea of being able to spread pods evenly around the Kubernetes cluster as you can do now. And we integrated this solution with VictorOps for our alerting for the operations team, which was really successful because we were actually able to run full incidents, and this helped us build out our incident response processes as part of that, because we ended up needing to get ISO 27001 as part of this. Okay, on to the next case study. So this was a fintech startup that came along and asked us to work with them. They had some growing pains as they were broadening out into markets and they were becoming a popular platform. They had minimal traditional monitoring, and they had some availability and performance issues, and that was actually caused by a particular platform bug, which we were able to solve, and they had a very small team. So what was the motivation? So we needed to improve the availability of the platform. We needed to improve the performance of the platform, and that bug I alluded to before, we needed to be able to resolve that, and we didn't 100% understand what it was. Just take remote control away from you for a second.
Apologies.
All right. And we needed to make sure it was fit for purpose out of the box. And we needed to have minimal team effort to deploy that solution. All right, so what did we deploy? So we deployed Datadog. We migrated the Kubernetes cluster to the latest EKS version. We integrated Datadog into the whole deployment process so that it was really simple to get up and running. Ingested logs, and this, of course, then helped us to be able to diagnose the platform bug, which was a kind of little interesting bug that we had to get AWS involved in. Very peculiar, and it had to have a certain number of ducks all in a row for this bug to happen, but we were able to resolve it, and it also helped highlight performance issues. All right, case study C. So who were they? They were a startup telehealth provider. They had massive scaling issues, as you can imagine, about a year ago. Limited time, so we really needed to get something in now. And they had a complicated multi-application ecosystem because of the nature of what was going on. They had all sorts of pieces of the puzzle in there. And they had a couple of very large key customers, which had high SLA requirements. So thinking about that commercial relationship there. So what was the motivation? We needed to move fast. There's very few people in the team being a startup, and we needed to be able to have the desired solution understand various applications out of the box, We needed to be able to improve performance, and we needed to increase scale massively and rapidly. So what did we do? We deployed Datadog, integrated it with their AWS accounts. We developed a number of dashboards to help us get insights as to what was going on. We had deep integration with the application and database, and that allowed us to identify a number of bugs or features, I suppose, so that we could actually get some idea of what was going on, and we were able to identify that there was some poor SQL, I guess, in one respect. While it worked for a small number of users, as the users got bigger, it didn't. So we had to rewrite some of that, or help the application team rewrite that. We actually also ended up sharding the entire application. So for those key customers, we took the whole application ecosystem and deployed it again to help improve the SLOs of the environment. And we also deployed read replicas. So we took some of the load off our databases and spread it across. So things like running large reports were now on the read replicas. And that's pretty much it. So that's the end. We might wrap up then. All right, cool. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Waldo, for coming all the way from the US. Apologies everybody with a little bit of latency issues and double bounces that we had. It kind of reminds me of the old school days of working on a hardware with in data centers when you had double bouncing keys and things. But it's the life of living on the internet. Cool.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Greg. It's been a lot of fun. So, all right.
Awesome.
Our ANZ friends, have a great day, and US folks, have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.